Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We are back again to build the future we want. Can we take our seats, please? While we are settling down, I would like to tell you my most favorite story. So let's take our seats and lend me your ears and listen to this story. There was a priest, a very busy priest. And you know, during the Christmas time, priests are so busy because they are looking for the best sermon to preach. But this priest, at 12 midnight, he had not gotten, he hasn't even written a sentence on his sermon because his little boy of 5 years old was there, saying, "Daddy, I want this. Daddy, I want that." So he was wondering, what am I going to do today? How am I going to get on with the business of my sermon? So what did he do? He suddenly looked at the wall. There was a big map. He said, a big map of the wall. So he stripped the map and he tore the map to pieces. And he said, "Now, my boy, come help me. I need your help. Try and fix this up again." So the boy, in less than 10 minutes, the boy was back. He had fixed the map. The the priest was, "Oh no, what, how did you manage this?" And he said, "Daddy, I just looked at the back. If you look at the back of the world map, there is the picture of a man. So I didn't need to bother with where is Japan, where is Nagoya, I just fixed the man back. And when I got the man right, I got your world map. I got your world." So, and that brings me to the topic of today. If we get the man right, we will get the world we want. And that's why we're doing education. Educate the man rightly, and you'll get the kind of world you want. So today's topic that we're going to be looking at together, because we're all in this together, is ESD 2030. What is it going to look like? This is very exciting because we create the world we want. So it's going to look like us. It's going to look like the quality of people we are, the quality of education we have had. And this morning I have a very dynamic panel. People who love the environment, people who love education, people who love people, who have worked with children, who have worked with teachers, who have worked with institutions that can make a difference. On my immediate left, I have Professor Juan Diaz de la Torre. He is the leader, the president of the Union of Teachers in Mexico, one of the largest, body of teachers. And when I was talking with him, he just said, "I'm a teacher." He's many things, but he's a teacher. You're welcome, sir. Yes. And next to this great teacher who leads, how many people in your union? How many teachers in your union?
1.5
million. 1.5 million.
1.5 million. Wow. Wow. Then next to her, I have the Minister of Education from Ghana. Ghana is one of my favorite countries. Yes, the gold country, a great people. And she is Professor Nana Jane Okwoku Agemang, Minister of Education, Ghana. Can we give her? And next, we have an experienced hand in education. He has worked with education, worked with UNESCO, advising on the right to education. I mean, his life is education and right to education. How do we get people involved in education? He is presently the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to education, Mr. Kishore Singh. Can we put our hands together for him? Okay. And then we have the vice president, of one of the foremost foundations in environmental education. Again, the word education. Anything we want to do, we must educate for it. The Foundation for Environmental Education. They have worked with many international organizations, and this particular lady is a very dynamic lady who loves education and loves children and loves people. She is Leslie Jones, FEE Vice President. Can you? And now comes the excitement. The next gentleman I'm going to introduce. If we get it right, this is the leader, not just of tomorrow, because tomorrow starts today. Today. And we're going to see if we've done a good work. And he has been amongst 140 students. He was chosen to come and be the voice of the young people. And his name, he said I should just introduce him as Bernardo. Bernardo, he is a high school student from Belo Horizonte. Good morning. Welcome, Bernardo. Yeah. And then you are all here. So without much ado, I'm going to ask our minister. I think I'm going to start from our minister. The first question. Now, please keep your eyes on 2030. How, in your opinion, will education have to change to prepare for the challenges ahead?
Thank you very much, and thank all of you for coming, and to UNESCO for the invitation, and to Japan for hosting. In order to think of the education we want in the future, I suggest that we need to begin by interrogating the very foundations, the very philosophical foundations of education as we have it now. We need to see education and development as very close allies. I don't think it is enough that we think of education as something that prepares you for another activity outside of education. Education is life, development is life. And the focus of our meeting is about education and sustainable development. Sustainable development is about every discipline of life, just as education is. If you're talking about sustainable development today, then it presupposes that the world is in danger. And truly the world is, and that education has a role to play. And therefore we cannot think of education as we used to, as a place where you acquire knowledge and you acquire skills. Now you need to acquire many more. You need to acquire even the skill of an attitude. You need to acquire the values that we all share. We need to articulate these values. And we need to focus on the centrality of education even more than we have done. And having said that, I know that I've said a lot and there's so much more I have not done. So in terms of teacher preparation, in terms of teacher training, in terms of the role of the teacher as a facilitator of learning, in terms of the role of the student as the center of the teaching experience, I think all of these will have to be evaluated. We cannot have the education we have now and then look ahead. And we cannot also say that it is up to the youth to come and pick it up. It is up to us who are here now to show the responsibility and to chart a path that others may follow. I'll end here now, but I believe there'll be other opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. The minister said that things have to change. Teachers would have to change. We have to change the way we do things. I would like Mr. Kishore Singh to take this further and give us detail. Has it started changing? In what ways do teachers, what kind of change do we have to see specifically in our teachers?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to UNESCO. And thank you very much, moderator. I'd like to express my deep gratitude to UNESCO and to Government of Japan for this laudable initiative in organizing this meeting, which is extremely opportune in the context of today's discussion on post-2015 development agenda, where education for sustainable development is at the center stage. Yesterday, I was very happy to listen to the roundtable, ministerial roundtable, where number of advances made in this field, initiatives, educational programs, but also the challenges and the perspectives were highlighted. And I think the United Nations General Assembly resolution on the decade gives us the possibility to build on the experience further. With your permission, I would like to highlight 2 or 3 key issues which I think are extremely important, but which did not figure in our discussion as well yesterday, and which I think are matter of real concern today, are critically important. First, you know that you made the Bonn Declaration, where the phrase, and I quote from the declaration, uneconomic model of development, uneconomic development model, and society which is not sustainable because of the inequities that there are there, and inequalities among countries and within people. We are living in a world where 1% of the world's population owns more than 80% of wealth, and more than 80% even do not own more than 10%. These inequities are, and I will join the minister, real world is in danger. The social tension might lead to social explosion. And this is a message in Oxfam's briefing paper. This is also a message of UNITAR. And this is what I dwelt in my report to the General Assembly on right to education and post-2015 development agenda. I think, therefore, that our focus should be on human rights-based approach to development and sustainable development, in the sense that development must be just, equitable. We must respect, always bear in mind, the fundamental principles of social justice and of equity enshrined in Millennium Declaration, but which are foundations of the whole United Nations system. And I would like to say that we need, and I will come back to that, education responsibility, but more in line with the role of business in education and society, because today what we need is corporate accountability in order that when it comes to education, the private providers do not remain unfettered, but are regulated in order to preserve education as a social good, and in order to ensure that under overall coordinating role of the government, education is harnessed to the values of human rights, to social interest, and above all to ethical values, and I'd like to come back to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, education has to change globally, generally, sectorally. But I would like to go back to the teacher, because that's where we start from. These big changes we want to see, can the schools that we have now, as they are today, can they bring about this change? Are the teachers prepared? And I think that question is going to go to the president, of the Teachers Association, Mr. Juan. Are the teachers prepared for this change?
Well, hello. First of all, of course, I'd like to thank UNESCO and the government of Japan for having this possibility. A person like myself, I'd like to say I'm just a teacher, really. However, I'm nothing less than a teacher either, and indeed, there is an amazing possibility for us to share our thoughts in a meeting such as this, in a conference such as this, and it's very, very valuable. It's a fundamental value. However, the whole process of education reforms taking place across the world, in some ways perverse reforms, need to look at the challenges and responsibilities that teachers face. The problem is not in the classrooms. Teachers around the world in general, well, you can say they are intelligent. There is potential for change. There is a vocation. However, it's important that before forming a better future, we have to look very carefully at the obstacles and the challenges and how they have come about. We can't take on the future without looking at the shortcomings and burdens that affect the majority of the world's citizens. And at the same time, I'd like to say that we have 120 million people in my country. We have 30 million children enrolled in school. We have 62 ethnic groups in the country before the Europeans arrived in our country. We have an enormous amount of a coastline, and I represent 1.5 million teachers who are working for a better world for the 30 million children in our country. However, if we don't identify the issue of inequality that's already been spoken about, if we don't take a step forward and go beyond rhetoric, and the official rhetoric is that education is change, is a solution for that paves the way for development. However, unless we actually have concrete measures that actually lead to transformation in the very foundations of education, then teachers, wherever they are in the world, who are ready to change the world, won't be able to do so. Also, there isn't a kind of general consensus, let's say, over the theme of education. Now, you speak a lot about education in public, when the public authorities, for example, so in the social sphere or the educational sphere, don't see things in the same eyes, don't harmonise their actions. It's very difficult to move forward with the relevant kind of teaching methods and infrastructure for schools and connectivity when there are billions of children who don't actually have access to internet, for example. Then I'm sure that in the next few years we won't be able, not only will we not be able to overcome our problems, but the gap between those who have and those who don't have will only grow. So we need to have this spirit of change. That's something that teachers have and have always had, and that will always continue. Particularly in Mexico, I can speak about Mexico, of course, we are undergoing a major economic, educational reforms, and this leads us to face up to the challenges of globalization, but also to do away with inequality and these gaps which exist between the haves and the have-nots, to try and reduce this gap. And that would be my first comment for today.
Wow. There is need for change. Teachers have the potential, for this change. But you and I know that you cannot take someone where you have not been. It's good to have potential, but if potential is not brought into full, action, for people to see, then it's useless. So I think we need to undergo massive training of teachers, for where we want to go. I think that takes me to Bernardo. Let's see, Bernardo, what's your take on this? Have you seen any change in your teachers? This change we're talking about. What kind of teacher would you like to see?
Well, I think teachers have changed for the past years. Education has changed because teachers are not the masters of knowledge anymore. We're in the age of information. Information is easily obtainable, so they cannot behave as guardians of knowledge. So they had to adapt to that new reality. They're now guides on how to use that knowledge, and I could see that difference. But I don't think teachers are ready, and I don't think students are ready. I think we need a huge training for them to be ready, because since we're young, and this is something I had a chance to perceive during the conference in Okayama by talking to the other representatives, we are taught a mentality of inferiority. We're taught that we cannot change the world, and that's a huge problem, a huge problem. And the teachers nowadays are the students that learned that a long while ago, and even though they want to change, they still have that inner voice telling them that they can't. Why? Because they were taught that at some point in their lives. And this is why the world is not changing. That's one huge problem that we have to change. And that needs a whole takeover of education for us to know what to do. You know, students have a huge issue with that. And I want to quote Malala in this, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, when she said, "One pen, one book, one student, and one teacher can change the world." We have millions of pens, millions of books, millions of students, and millions of teachers. So why aren't we changing it as effectively as we could? That's because our teachers and our students are being taught that they can't do it. And that's a huge problem that we have to change. You can change the world, and that's something we have to realize.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, before I go on to the next speaker, taking up your question, I still want you, how can you change the world?
Well, that may seem odd, but I think by being an everyday example, you can change the world. By being an example to those around you, just by not throwing trash on the streets, by saving bath water, by not throwing trash on stadiums when you go there, by helping your classmates, your friends, when they're in time of need, by participating in social programs when you have a chance. I think that's a huge difference you can make. And people usually think, hey, but I'm just a drop in the ocean. Yes, you are. That's how democracy works. You're an individual, and democracy is a system that prioritizes majority. But that doesn't mean at any point that you can't make a difference. You can be the drop that makes the ocean flood. And maybe that's just by being someone good in your inner circle. You know, it's something you can do.
Yeah. Thank you, Bernardo. Many drops of water form an ocean. Yes, yes. But let me go on to Ms. Jones. Yes. I want us to take up from where Bernardo left, because he mentioned Malala's speech. One book, one note, one pen. It's enough to change the world. Why are basic skills such as reading and writing not enough to face sustainable development challenges? You know, we've had that for many years, and we are still where we are. Why are these basic skills not enough for sustainable development? Now we're looking at education for sustainable development. Is that enough? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's going to be hard following Bernardo. That was wonderful, Bernardo. Thank you. First of all, can I also thank Japan for hosting this amazing conference, and also can I thank UNESCO for acknowledging the vital role that NGOs like my foundation can play in contributing to this agenda of ESD. We have more than 80 members throughout the world delivering 5 environmental education programs which focus on being real and being relevant and taking education and putting it into action. And I think that that leads me into the response to your question, that although obviously reading and writing skills, the basic education skills, are incredibly important, they will only take students so far. So what we need is for people to, for education within the environment of education, both formally and informally, to help young people and adults as well to develop those sort of life skills so that they are able to envisage and understand the linkages between the environment, between the economy, and between social issues, so that they can understand the consequences of their actions. As Bernardo was saying, everyone can make a difference. Understand government and the consequences of its actions, and also understand the private sector and be able to make reasoned judgments.
Thank you. Now, things have to change, the way we learn, the content, the environment in which we learn. But now I want us to take it, you all have experiences in education. If not in schools, you have with governments, where you have with institutions. I want you to now share from your experience, and I'm going to let everybody share something. From your specific experiences, do you see a shift in the discussion on the relevance of education in light of global challenge? Do you see a shift? Because today we have, and I want you to bear in mind the kind of challenges we have today, from environmental challenges to social challenges to economic challenges. Yesterday night, as I got back, I turned on the news and I saw in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, in a school, the children came out, about 1,000 children for the morning assembly, and they didn't know that one of those students was trapped with bombs. And he let out the bombs, and over 45 students died. They were about 11 years old, Then we have the issue of climate change. We have economic crisis. This is the world we are in. So from your specific experience, do you already see a shift in the discussion on the relevance of education in the light of these challenges? Let me come back to you again, if you can start the discussion and share from your experience. Yes.
Gracias. Thank you. Well, of course, there are changes, regrettably, however, not of the magnitude that we would like. For example, there are less and less books being read, or let's say the books are not the main form of communication anymore. And as Bernardo said, there's a certain way we have to develop. Now, when it comes to freedom of knowledge, the process behind it, and the whole process of education and the changes in higher education and the new ways of actually testing skills isn't necessarily through schools. Now, what Bernardo said is true. The role that the teacher plays is becoming increasingly uncertain. The teacher is becoming aware that they are not the driving force, or let's say the guardian of knowledge. Teachers don't know if they have to be leaders or trainers or facilitators. The empowerment of teachers within their communities means that they have to change their way of acting. This is an issue that, of course, exists. However, I believe that the changes aren't of the magnitude that we would like. And I believe that the gap is ever growing between some and others. Now, as teachers, I believe we have to be optimistic. We have to imagine a better future, because if we can't do this from the educational sector, then it won't happen from anywhere, because there will always be vested economic interests elsewhere. And there will always be the hidden or opaque elements unless we open up in this world. And those who want to work in the education business, let's say, and see education as a way of making money, need to look at the basic education, which represents $13 billion. But we can't turn this into a kind of a business. It needs to be an opportunity for those who are deprived, and to try and improve their conditions and to give them more knowledge. And so I believe that, yes, educational programs can transform the way we do things, can have a major impact. And then, if not, then we will lose our way.
He has said that in this change, education ministry would have to take the lead. What kind of content they lead in? What do we teach? How do we teach? And remember that Bernardo has said teachers are no longer in control. There is the internet, So how do you see this change, please, Madam?
All right. First of all, let me talk about the fact that education has been under a lot of stress for a long time. And our relevance is sometimes questioned. Sometimes understandably so, as parents invest heavily in their children's education and they go on to graduate to move back in the home, it is not an amusing spectacle. So that pressure also exists. But in order to respond to Bernardo and your question also, we have to begin by imagining that change. We have to imagine an education and a world different from what we live in. In concrete terms, we have to imagine that the world can be food secure. We have to imagine that it is possible to provide adequate shelter. It is possible to live in a world without fear. It is possible to live in a world where we respect each other. This call for diversity. It doesn't have to be the same, but it can be of equal value. We have to imagine a world where we respect the fundamental human rights of individuals are respected.
Yeah.
A world where there's equity and equality.
Yes, if I can just comment, just still with you. How do you do this in Ghana with the teachers?
In the first place, you have to imagine it is possible first.
Yes.
So you imagine it is possible, then you move on to strategize. How do I get there? Who is this person called the teacher? How do I prepare this person? If it is in the mind that the world cannot change, this is where the imagination is very powerful. And this is also where the humanities plays a very, very important role to create, to perceive that change is possible. That all the received knowledge I have doesn't have to be all there is. That there are other alternatives. This will take time, this will take energy, this will take resources, but you need to get there. Breaking it down even further, let us look at our curriculum in the classrooms. There's too much hair splitting too soon. Sustainable development, education for sustainable development is about every discipline. It's not only about the social sciences. It's not about the environment only. It's about medicine. It's about language. It's about culture. It's about religion. It's about all of these disciplines. So the disciplines must merge more. If you ask me specifically what we can do, we need to merge the disciplines more than we are doing. We need to see religion in physics. We need to see economics in agriculture. Some are very easy. But I think that the hair splitting is very, very unhelpful. And the most dangerous part of the hair splitting is that it ascribes responsibilities to others. It is environmentalist responsibility to talk about sustainable development. No, it's everybody's responsibility because the risk is a global risk. Whether you describe yourself as developed or underdeveloped or whatever developed, everybody is at risk. And the comforting thing is that we have enough now to change the world. And we need to get serious with it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Singh, what shift should take place? Yes.
Thank you. So as I was saying, thank you. As I just mentioned, I like to build upon these big challenges of creating equitable societies based on justice and bringing about more equality of opportunity, especially in education, which is a permanent challenge. You all have, honorable ministers, as decision makers, a responsibility under United Nations General Assembly resolution, the future we want of 2012, which says, and I quote from the resolution, right to quality education is essential for sustainable development, and we need to build capacity of education system to respond to that. I think that we still have a lot to do in terms of transforming education system to respond to these challenges. Let me outline, for the purposes of policy and program, 3 key areas. First, international community, all states and governments remain committed to number of instruments relating to sustainable development. Convention on Biodiversity of 1972, the UNESCO's Declaration on Responsibility of Present Generation towards Future Generation, Bonn Declaration, and number of others. The states have responsibility to translate the provisions of these instruments into concrete action at national level. And that is what can provide a solid basis to advance in terms of educational programs. I will mention, for example, just 2 cases. I am very happy to say, and we must applaud the Japanese approach, because the constitutional mission of Japan, Constitution says respect for human rights, which was mentioned, for the welfare of future generations. And therefore the role of human rights-based approach to sustainable development is there. Constitution of Ecuador, for example, mentions the concept of Summa Cause, good living, which is in the Constitution in terms of respect and harmony between nature and human beings. And we have, therefore, developed the education system in order to provide global responses to the requirements of climate change and environment. Therefore, the implementation of normative instruments is through education, and creating great awareness about this is one challenge. Second, we, particularly in future, need to develop new concepts and programs to build new ethics for our common humanity. This is the message in Secretary General's report. We also need new ethics of conservation of ecosystems. And there is a tremendous interest today, as I said, in accountability, corporate social responsibility, and ethics for business in order to ensure that we bring all stakeholders, particularly private sector, to be part of the government and public and other NGO community, but on the basis of fundamental principles of human rights, equality of opportunity, especially. To build a just social order. I will, if you permit, just build on one argument more, and that is that how can we make education equalizing force? I think third area which needs to be discussed is the skills development, which is essential to quality education for sustainable development. Blue economy, for example, is one example. And therefore, we need to build on skills, but again here, the human rights-based approach in the sense that building technical capacity of teachers and education system, yes, but at the same time ensuring that we develop the human personality fully as a whole, and that every student in order, when receiving education, becomes capable to develop the values of society, of human rights, of respect for knowledge, and therefore the essential humanistic mission of education as vis-a-vis its only instrumental role. And I think these are major challenges for the education system of today and tomorrow.
Oh, thank you so much. You've shown us that there is indeed shift in discussion at the policy level, at the high level, and that is encouraging. Now I'm going to move on to our Vice President, from FEE. I know you have a large network of schools all over. Have you seen this shift in discussion on the relevance of education in light of the global challenges in your large global network of schools?
Yeah, as you say, one of the programs that we run is the Eco Schools program, which is, as the Secretary General mentioned yesterday, is the largest environmental education program in the world. And I think the focus of that the focus of it is on making education real and relevant to the challenges that we face. A key aspect of that is the fact that it should be student-led, so that we're actually looking at the focus being on the students, how they structure the projects and the programs that they develop within the school. And if I could just give you one small example of this reality and relevance, one of our member organisations in Uganda has been introducing the Eco Schools programme over the last couple of years. And in one area of Uganda, the focus that the students decided was on the theme of water. And so what they decided to do was introduce rainwater harvesting. So just introduce a very simple approach, the big water gathering barrels. And what this achieved for the school initially was that they started growing medicine garden, they started growing food, and they actually improved the hygiene facilities within the school. So that girls, particularly, were able to stay on longer in education. These messages then were taken out back into the homes and the villages, and within the homes, this system and process was replicated. So it's a really powerful example of how you can make education and ESD real and relevant in our challenging times.
Thank you. And Bernardo, how is this shift? What's the discussion among the youth, the young people? What are they saying about the kind of education? You've told us some things already, but, the discussion now, when you talk amongst yourself, what discussion?
Well, we can perceive a shift. Yes, we think it's happening. It's extremely slow, excruciatingly so, but it's happening. And I think the conference we participated in Okayama is something that shows that. It's the culmination of all the shift that's been going on. Because youth representatives are much more important to politics now than they were 20 years ago. Much more important than 50 years ago. And I think that's a huge difference. That's a great shift. And it's great. Even though we are not sustainable now, for most part, we can see a bright future ahead of us. And young people, they really see that. They see that even though they think they can't change the world, they can change their communities, they can change their lifestyles, and that's a great beginning. So, yes.
You're so right. We have realized that we can't do without the young people. Recently in one of the workshops, the Intergenerational Center led by Professor Peter Cochrane, and one of the decisions was that any conference we must go with young people, our students.
If I may add something.
Yes, please.
The representative of Mexico said something in the conference in Okayama, and I think it would be very nice to replicate it here. It's a very pertinent statement, which is, we do not inherit nature from our parents. We borrow it from our children. So to take a decision about sustainability without consulting youth representatives is simply weird.
Yeah, it's changed. Yeah, we've gone away from that. We are consulting, we are discussing. Yes, thank God. Thankfully, we've gone away from that. Yes, and renowned panelists, they've told us, given us an idea of where we're going, the changes that have taken place, what still needs to be done. Education now has to be more holistic. Learning content must change, must integrate some of these vital issues. There has to be learning outcomes, pedagogical changes. The learning environment has to change. There has to be societal transformation, and so many things. Now you are all here, and I want us to keep our eyes on 2030. You've heard certain things. I don't know if you have questions, if you have comments. Let's have your take on this. ESD in 2030. Can I have some questions? Can I have some comments from all of you? Yes, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum.
From Indonesia, yes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
In the name of God, in the name of God, the Almighty, the Merciful.
One is for Madame Nana, respectable minister. You are talking about philosophical foundation. The why do we educate? Do you think that teachers, parents give enough meaning and understanding to the children, to the pupils? Why are we educating them? Because we have been too busy with the how and the what. And I don't think the why is not there. And I agree with you that the philosophical foundation has got to be stressed. My next question is for Bernardo. Bernardo, you are probably now among us the age that is still very close to your parents. You know, what do you see that the role of parents should change so that the children, the pupils, you know, can also have stronger spiritual, emotional, intellectual, social, and physical power for the future? Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Oh, thank you so much for those fascinating questions. I would take two more before I go back to the... Yes, please. Is that Senegal I'm seeing again? No. No, okay, yes, please. And then we'll have Mexico, and then we have Kenya. Yeah. So Senegal, Mexico, Kenya. Can we have them in that order? Senegal, then Mexico, then Kenya.
Senegal.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. A few moments ago, you were asking us about 2030. I would like to share some thoughts with the panelists, and perhaps I'll be discussing questions that we're all thinking about at the end of October 2012, when I received a phone call from the Prime Minister of my country, who told me that we will be putting you in charge of the National Education Department. Now, I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about what is my mission all about and why was I put in charge of these duties? Because I'm a statutory auditor by training. Well, I decided to engage in a bit of prospective thinking. In Senegal, we have 3 levels of education before we get to the secondary diploma. We have primary education for 6 years, middle school for 4 years, and then secondary school for 3 years. So that gives us a total of 13 years. And to get a master's degree, there's another 5 years. So a pupil who, at 6 years of age, goes to primary school for the first time, if everything goes well for him or her, with no repeatings, this person entering school today will get his or her master's degree in 2032. So I started scratching my head, and I just realized that people are asking me to train someone for a job description that hasn't even been devised yet, for problems that today haven't even been clearly identified, and perhaps with teaching methods that haven't yet been established. So the answer to the question could be, yes, there is a shift in the role of educators. Now, I'm not really sure, I don't agree when people say that educators will no longer play an important role. They will always play an important role. It's just that that role will undergo a shift. This person will no longer be someone who merely imparts knowledge. This will be somebody who is a mediator of knowledge, a facilitator for knowledge. Because children will be gleaning knowledge
because of all of the different sources of knowledge that abound in his environment, and the teacher is a person who will help that youngster use new technologies, draw on all of these different sources of knowledge that will enable that person to have the critical thinking skills to solve problems which have yet emerged and to work in a job that for the time being hasn't yet even been imagined. Thank you.
The teacher must not be just the normal classroom teacher that we know. The teacher must be familiar with all the places where the young people get their knowledge. Yes, let's have Mexico, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I would like to thank the panelists also for their excellent contribution to the discussion. I would like to thank you for steering the panel discussion along with such expertise. I just wanted to underscore the importance in this session that we've placed on teacher training. This is certainly one of our main challenges. We have to continue to strengthen educational curricula, educational processes in order to rise to the challenges of equitable, sustainable development on a global scale. The active participation of teachers is of vital importance in this entire process. Now, I'm the focal point for UNESCO in Latin America and also for EFA, in fact. And Mexico shall be playing the lead role for our region in December of this year, and also in conformity with the recent Lima Declaration, which was adopted by the Ministers of Education of Latin America and the Caribbean countries. I believe that it's important to stress the issue of full convergence between the outcomes of this World Conference on ESD, which has gathered us here today in Nagoya, and the work being done by the international team of educators in Education for All, so that we can have a fresh look at the importance of teachers training, realizing that it will play a critical role in the post-2015 education agenda that will be adopted in Korea 2015, and also the development agenda for post-2015 that will be adopted next September in September. So I would like to hear from the panelists on this particular point. Thank you.
Okay, panelists, I hope you have taken note. Let's move on to Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for really chairing this session in a wonderful way. I'll make some comments and maybe ask one or two questions. I like the idea of religion being in medicine. We should talk about national values in medicine. Because sometimes all of us have national values. But I wonder whether we see these national values in all our education strata. And that is key as far as I'm concerned. It's part of education for sustainable development. The other thing is, somebody talked about the widening gap between the haves and have-nots. When we talk about the right to quality education, it can be a mirage if indeed we find in our societies certain schools where there are no teachers, or one teacher teaching, say, 300 students. We can see a similar scenario where there is no electricity. You find in certain countries in the continent, 50% of primary schools have no electricity at all. Even solar power, God-given power, is not there. 50%. There are places where there is no internet. So when we talk right to quality education, governments must be prepared to spend, to increase the budget for education. So that's between, for example, between 25 even to 40%, so that we can be seen to be more serious than we are. Otherwise, this is just mere talk. And then we talk about holistic education. Holistic education means that we must empower children to do things that which they must do to survive. For example, in our country, in Kenya, we have something called health and nutrition program in schools. And as part of this program, we teach our children to have kitchen gardens. Because in informal settlements, where people are very poor, they have no pieces of land. But it's possible for them to have kitchen gardens where they can grow vegetables and improve their nutrition, so to speak. And then in our schools, we have endeavored to make sure that every primary school has water. So we have endeavored to have a water tank in every school. Because in the absence of water to clean hands, because we teach them to clean hands 5 times a day, health becomes a problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I know that. I learned to wash my hands several times in Kenya. You have that tradition. Yes, and you talked about national values. Before I go back to the panel, I think I just have to mention this, because since I came to Japan, for this conference, I've been fascinated. There is one national value that is clear, and that is respect. I've been intrigued. Japanese respect themselves and people. From the top to the lowest, everybody respects people. And that's a wonderful value. On this note, let me go to the panelists. Yes. Let's start from Bernardo, and we go like that to answer the questions. Yes, Bernardo?
Well, first, the question from Indonesia, I believe. The question about parenting. Yeah, it's a tough question. Well, I think parenting has to change as well, because parenting can't be the same with children that do not act the same as they did 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. Parents, just as teachers, they cannot act as the bastions of knowledge. They cannot act as masters of fate of their children, because that's not our reality anymore. It's simply changed. Parents must be guides. They must be helpers. They must be friends to help their children find the right path and not try to impose something. Because nowadays, one thing we can really perceive when talking to young people is that they don't really want to follow the mainstream path anymore. In the case of Brazil, for example, which is something I got really in touch, and I could see that was a reality in other countries as well at the Yokohama Convention, is parents always said, hey, you're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be a doctor. And that doesn't work like that anymore. Money is not the main reason for us choosing professions anymore. That's something that changed a lot between young people. So parents should be helpers. They should help their child find their path, find the right path they want to follow, the path they really like, so that they can contribute to the world in the best way possible. So parenting should be aimed at the guiding section.
Thank you.
Well, difficult questions.
Okay.
The question about the agenda, recommendations for the agenda, I can't really think of anything now, because that's something that must be really considered, because it's very important. But if I can think of anything, I'll really look for you, madam. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, Leslie, yes.
Can I just comments? We've focused so much on the importance of young people and students and learning in schools. Just to extend that further in the context of homes and parents and the wider community, I think this has to be a two-way process. So it's an incredibly powerful opportunity for young people, for students, to take the messages that they're learning home. And again, helping within the home and the wider community to put it into practice. But I also think it's important that we don't say, right, it's over to you. It's your responsibility. We can't do that either. We have to, as adults, play our part in contributing towards, the changes that we need to make in order to achieve a more sustainable world and live more sustainable lives. Can I also make a quick comment on the representative from Mexico emphasized again the importance of teacher training. Again, I think there's an incredibly important role for the non-governmental organizations to play in this. on the ground there, and again in our members across the world, there's a huge amount of expertise and resource which can be shared with schools and is shared with schools through programs, the environmental education and ESD programs that are delivered throughout the world, such as eco schools. So those links between schools, governments and NGOs are incredibly important.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Singh.
I think let me start with the question of values which was raised in education and also the spiritual part of it. For example, China is one country that I know which has in its constitution the question of spiritual values. And as I mentioned, today we need really a very strong focus with real commitment to develop through education system ethical values in order to enrich the essential objectives of education which many of you mentioned. These objectives are in international human rights treaties, for example, mutual respect, respect for richness of diversity of cultures, of knowledge systems in the world, and of mutual understanding and international cooperation. We also need to revitalize certain traditional values in the context of sustainable development. For example, in Japan, the concept of motenai, which means not to waste, and this is extremely important in our consumer society of today. And I would like this to link to the question of quality and teaching profession. Indeed, unfortunately, it is true that quality is falling. There is degradation in reality. And the reason is that the education system is not able to respond to the emerging challenges, and particularly teaching profession is becoming really a profession which is least coveted, whereas it should be most respectful. And therefore, there is need for us to restore the importance of teaching profession in terms of professional status of teachers and their social esteem. And that is where we really need to have strong educational focus. Teachers must be able to impart those values to ingrate in the whole of education system, not only at basic education level, but even at higher education level, the research studies that are necessary. And how can we prepare teachers and give them in service permanent training in order to cope with the challenges. Finally, I would like to make one comment which I consider most important in terms of the teaching profession and the quality, and that is your commitment to investment in education in Bone Declaration. Investment in education is investment in future. This is in the declaration. Investment is indeed in education. Investment in education is indeed the best investment a country can make. But today, what is the reality? The reality is that the public spending in education is decreasing and should be really upheld and enhanced as maximum possible investment in education. And therefore, if we really are serious about giving adequate educational responsibility to sustainable development agenda for future, we need to give highest importance to public investment in education as an essential public good, in which, based on a human rights approach, everybody should be participative and beneficiary of equitable development process led by human rights framework. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Investment, funding, research. Yes?
Yes, thank you. The distinguished delegate from Indonesia, thank you very much for emphasizing the philosophical foundations of education. Why are we doing this? It is very, I find it a very important area because teaching by itself always runs the risk of falling into routine. And because of the routine, we tend to forget, why are we even doing this? And in our discussions of education, whenever it comes to teachers, even this room included, with all apologies, we're talking about training, we're talking about maybe performance, self-development, upgrading of the teacher, reorienting the teacher, the curriculum evaluation, results, the benefits. But why do we put a teacher in the classroom? To what end? I've had a chance to study a lot of lesson plans from a lot of countries, very, very recently. Some of the countries that are being highly ranked. And there's one area that I'm finding missing, and that is, this particular question. And I find it very, very worrisome that this area should be missing in terms of why is this happening? Why is the student learning this at this time? For how long have students of this age been learning this? Has the world been the same? Where have been the changes? And I think these are all important questions that we need to bring to the forecourt of the teacher's mind on a on a daily basis. And yes, I hear my brother from Kenya about the values. Yes, we need to see the values everywhere. The values must reflect. In UNESCO, we talk about peace in the minds of people. It must reflect in everything we do. They are not just idle words. They are words that have a lot of meaning. It's been 100 years since the World War I. Why do we still live in fear? What has gone wrong? And what it is that education ought to be doing? What is our role in all of this? And at this level, we are not here to complain. We are the ones to take action. And we must act, and act quickly. I think I'll end here. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Yes, that's fantastic. Yeah, Mr. President. Yeah.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the representative of Indonesia for having broached the subject of values. We teachers are often very proud when the OECD says that the difference that we can make hinges on our teachers. We certainly feel praised. But if there's no shared responsibility, if we don't realize that we are all responsible for education, the media, governments, of course, and of course, parents. If we want universal values, fraternity, equality, liberty, respect, tolerance for others, if that's what schools are all about, to make sure that those values prevail. The problem is that the predominant value or the predominant model focuses on economic development. And basically the message that we're giving our students is that you can only be a success if you get a college degree in the exact sciences with high marks in mathematics. And this basically undermines the importance of values, and yet values alone can give us meaning in our lives and make our lives and our world a better place. So if we don't have a complete overhaul of not just schools and teachers, but the entire way in which society works, parents, churches, governments, if we can't change all of those things, it's going to be difficult for schools to really make a difference. We mustn't forget the fact that as we speak, the requirement of evaluating teachers' performance is a requisite, right? And that's fine, but we shouldn't overlook the fact that parents have a critical role in playing in passing on these universal values from one generation to another. So we might rank our teachers' performance, but we mustn't forget the fact that if we don't do other things, individualism, selfishness will override any attempts that we in the schools, anything that we try to do to enshrine these values in young people and try to create societies that are based on more fairness and equality. Now, in my country, in Article 3 of our Constitution of 1917, and we as teachers have always defended this tooth and nail, there are 3 principles here. That is the public obligation of the state to provide free, secular, universal education. And this is something that underpins all of the political statements, religious positions in our country. Now, I was listening to what Bernardo was just saying, and it makes me think about what Socrates once said when we talk about a rebellious youth that doesn't understand anything. Well, I think that that's what young people have to do. That's what they have to do. If they weren't so demanding, well, the processes of social transformation would never even get off the ground. We as adults who are in charge of the educational system, we have to show our commitment to this type of change and transformation. Let me just conclude by saying that in Mexico, private initiative, and this is something that was recently demonstrated in recent studies. People were asked, why are you a teacher? Well, 73% of those respondents said, it's because it's my calling. I feel it's my vocation. Now, if we were to go back in time and we were looking at, we asked them, what would you study? Well, most of them said, well, 80% of them I would study to be teachers. So basically this means that people who are in the teaching profession will always be there. There are always people in society who feel that that is their calling. And this is what we've seen when we heard this from the delegate of Kenya. We have to just change the role of teachers because the teachers will always feel that it is their calling.
We're nearing, the end of this session, and there's one exercise that I would like all of us to be engaged in. If we can, for 30 seconds, all of us, just shut our eyes and see ourselves in 2030. What do you see in education for sustainable development? What do you see? What kind of people do you see? What kind of generation, what kind of global citizens do you see? What kind of educational institutions? And what's the content? What are we teaching? How do we communicate? We are in 2030. So can we just take time to see ourselves in 2030, and I will come back to you after 30 seconds. As you see yourself, I want to remind all of us as we envision 2030 of the vision of education for sustainable development. It's a world where everybody has the opportunity to benefit from education and learn the values, behavior, and lifestyles required for a sustainable future and for positive societal transformation. This is the world, this is the vision of education for sustainable development. What do you see? Before I come back to the panelists to tell us in 1 minute each what they see in 2000, how do you see yourself, your role, what kind of people, what kind of products, what kind of institutions you see, but just in 1 minute. Before I come back to you, I would like to hear from the audience. Maybe we can take, yes, Nigeria. Yes, I cannot see. Okay, can you? Okay, Libya. So, can you see?
Tunisia.
Tunisia. Republic of Palestine, Korea, and far further. Yeah, so I can't see, I'm sorry, Côte d'Ivoire. So, but please, it has to be very sharp, just and to the point. All we want to hear, what do you see in 2030? Please, 30 seconds, so that we can take everyone that has indicated. Nigeria. Yeah, microphone, please. Nigeria is here.
Shall I start first? Because I have microphone from Korea.
Okay, please. Okay. All right.
I would like to add, in this age of, changing stage of education, add the value of community love. So every 77 billion people on this earth belong to their own community. So in their own community, if they love their own community, they begin to realize what human being is as a component of the ecological world. So as Madam Moderator mentioned of Japan's society of self-respect, this community will produce self-esteem. I think self-esteem is a very important aspect of ESD. By loving herself or himself, he can be a very brave person to make their community to be sustainable. Yesterday afternoon at the high-level roundtable, the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia mentioned of Sejahtera Center of Tongyong, South Korea. I was very amazed because I'm the president of foundation of that specific foundation. So in that foundation, I would like just invite all of you from global world. We have about 20 hectare educational center of 1 hectare building in beautifully sited southern coast of Korea. So you will have a good facility of housings and all the good facility of education in southern coast. So you're all welcome to South Korea for ESD Together for 23. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Love, yes, we need love. Nigeria, please, 30 seconds, please.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much, ma'am.
Yes.
By 2030, just 16 years away, so what do we imagine it to be? Through strategic and emotional thinking, I think the world will shrink more. Boundaries will disappear, and the drive for democratic process will bring about certain changes. More open society, more open schools, information technology will play a very great role that improve access to education and so on. Values will change. We may likely witness more violent extremism drawn by the feeling of repression and so on. We also need to respond to this because education grows from the ethos of the community. And so we need to imagine what the world will look like. Teachers will change, tools of teaching will change, so the planning must start now. I think that's the point I would like to make.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry if I cannot get the country. Yeah, the countries I called out earlier. Please, could you, I know we had like 2 countries, from my left. There was Libya, yes. There was Tunisia, yes. Thank you for helping me. Yeah, Libya, Tunisia. Can we hear your comments? Please keep it to 30 seconds so that we can have others.
شكرا جزيلا.
Yes, thank you. When you gave 30 seconds, the first image that came to my head was that of Bernardo, in fact. And he would probably become a counselor, let's say. And then there would be another young person who would be in Bernardo's place, and both of them would be speaking about change. So I would imagine Bernardo as a decision maker and a young person in his place actually speaking about change for the future. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Libya. Okay, then I had one at that far corner.
Tunisia.
Okay, Tunisia, then Palestine. Okay, Tunisia first, then we have Palestine, then we have Côte d'Ivoire. Yes.
شكرا.
Thank you. I am very happy to speak in between Libya and Palestine. I adore these 2 countries. Well, in 30 seconds, well, it's difficult to sum up in 30 seconds, so I'll try and be very swift. I think that a few years ago we responded to the question what we would be like in 2030 and what the basic knowledge would be like, or the basic skills needed would be like in 2030. And we spoke about knowledge of life skills. And above all, communication, altruism, the acceptance of others, mutual respect, and the ability to integrate into society with others. All of these values will probably be influenced upon negatively by technology. Why? Because education in itself through internet will be developed by 2030, but this will render human beings further away from each other. So we also have to be interested in this dimension, which will have an influence on other principles such as citizenship and in its national, regional and local aspects. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. When we speak about sustainable development, within the framework of a social context, I believe that between 2014 and 2030, there will be a complete overhaul, a complete revision of the principles that students would have learned via internet, let's say. And as my colleague from Tunisia said, I believe there will be a big difference between the principles and the values that we have today and what young people will acquire via the internet in the future. So I believe that we have to review the whole process so that in face-to-face interaction between teachers and students should be safeguarded, and also between students and parents. Principles and values are acquired at school and also at home. And if we come back to sustainable development from a social point of view, we have to link this to a type of economic sustainable development. That is to say, exploiting, for example, solar energy and how we can use that to produce electricity. And for powering internet, etc. So if students only look at technology, we will not have the necessary expertise that we need in tomorrow's world. And that's what we even see today. For example, when it comes to using waste or recycling waste at home and turning it into organic fertilizer, for example. So social and economic development are inseparable, and there needs to be an integration between the two domains. And I believe that this can only happen with the aid of school and with the aid of a teacher who, I'd just like to add, needs to develop so that teachers can go hand in hand with this development. So how can we train teachers so that they can really play this role of facilitator and to have a common language with students?
Please, 30 seconds.
Merci.
Thank you. For us, I would say that we have to think about the context, and we have to think about the context because if we want to have education which takes into account assured good development, then we do have to focus on love. That is to say, eliminating certain differences. This was already mentioned beforehand. This is extremely important because once you've experienced war, then you want to get rid of any kind of differences. Also, we have to take into account illiteracy. We have to really carry out the fight against illiteracy, because when we speak about education, yes, it's true, there are students, there are teachers. However, we can't forget, above all, the parents too. That's why I spoke about a type of education which needs to take into account the contexts, because if we want to succeed by 2013 in having a type of education that takes into account sustainability, teachers really have to play their role. However, as we're speaking about education and upbringing, not only formal education, parents also have to play their role. And I believe that this will be extremely important in developing countries, or poor countries in particular. So this is what I believe we can say about sustainable.
Final message. What do you see? But it's going to be one, I'm sorry, it has to be one sentence. So think about it. What do you see in 2030? Just that. One sentence, please. Mr. President, I'm going to start with you. One sentence. Yes.
Pues seguirá siendo un proceso.
Well, following a process like education, I believe it will be the fight for hope and for freedom against ignorance and fanaticism and prejudices and everything that the human spirit is all about. I wanted to end with just a few lines from a poet from an Aztec king who said this over 550 years ago. Birds of the 400 voices, the smell of the flowers, all of this I love, but what I love more than anything else is my fellow man. And I believe this is something that's extremely important.
We are important.
Yeah, thank you very
Your
much.
one sentence?
Yes, and I love the conclusions everybody gave because it led me to imagination.
Wow.
To imagine education leading to true justice. And I'm talking about economic justice, political and social. Education leading to freedom to think, the freedom to imagine, the freedom to innovate, and the freedom to be. Education and society being approximated as places for reinvention, places for respect for diversity, where the vulnerable are empowered. All types of education, whether it's higher education, technical, vocational, informal, non-formal, all of them being equally valued and being propelled into a world of peace.
Wow. Just imagine. Yes, Dr. Singh, your one sentence of 2030.
I would first like to say that personally I find it very difficult to imagine.
Mike, please can you?
I'm always forgetting, I'm sorry. I personally find it very difficult to imagine 2030 because could we imagine in 2000 as to what the world is going to be in 2010 and today? I didn't, at least I don't know anybody did. Now what I feel is most important for us to aspire. We must aspire in 2030 for a world which reflects UNESCO's constitutional mission, pursuit of ideals of humanity for justice. I was happy to hear from Ivory Coast also the poor countries and the fate of poor people. Poverty is the curse, biggest hurdle to realization of right to education and sustainable development, but also an affront to humanity as a whole. And therefore in 2030, our first goal in sustainable development agenda, total eradication of poverty. If we can achieve that, that I think would be a most commendable achievement. And finally, I would like to say that we need to, if we can have in 2030 a world where knowledge and education becomes most respectful, that is, I think, the best thing that we can aspire for. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, we can all eradicate poverty if we will all share. If we will all give out of what we have and not wait for government. Yes, Vice President Fee, what's your one sentence for 2030?
My one sentence is that everybody has a better understanding of the role that they can play locally and globally in ensuring that we create a better future for our young people.
Thank you. Bernardo, now what are the young people saying? One sentence.
Well, I think in 2030, we'll have universal education, which I do believe will be free of charge, free of discrimination, and free of ethnic and gender and religious restrictions. And I would like to end with a sentence used by Mrs. Irina Bokova in the opening at Okayama, when she said an kind of adaptation of the sentence in the UNESCO Declaration, which is, since war starts in the minds of adults, It's in the minds of children that we must build the defenses of peace.
Wow, wow, wow.
And if you'll excuse me, Mrs. Ekpisi,
yes?
for just a moment, I'd like to make an invitation for everyone to participate in a youth meeting that will happen during lunch. And I would like to read it really fast. We, the youth delegates, have prepared strategic recommendations to complement the gap around what is required from a youth perspective to drive the ESD agenda ahead and facilitate the rapid transition towards sustainability that we all know is so vital. We would like to extend an invitation to all conference participants to join us to talk about how we can work together to implement these recommendations. We will be working our session today during lunch from 1:15 to 2:45 outside the conference building, next to the large white statue of the horse and rider. This is a wonderful opportunity to understand, appreciate, and support innovative global and regional youth-led initiatives that are really driving the ESD agenda and having a significant impact. We hope to see you there. Sincerely, the UNESCO Global Youth Delegation. Thank you.
Yes, and what do I say to that? Yes, let's go learn from the youths. Let's go learn from the youths. It's time. In conclusion, I would like to share the words of Alan Kay, an American computer scientist. He said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. We can't create the future. But for us to do that, we must all be VIPs. We must all determine to live here as VIPs. And what is a VIP? The V is for vision. You know, men and women of vision, of vitality. The I is for involvement and innovation. The P is for process, planning, and performance. And if you look at these documents that have been prepared, the roadmap by UNESCO, you have a lot of details there. There's a lot of tools, a lot of knowledge that you can use. Please use the documents that you have been given. I cannot promise you that there will be no more wars. I cannot promise you that all our current global environmental, social, political, and economic challenges will be over. Neither can anyone promise you, as was reiterated by the Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Irina Bokova yesterday, that there will be no contrary winds. But you can be assured of this, that by 2030, the seeds grown today would have become trees. The children infused today with new ways of thinking about people, the environment, the future, as well as our governments, the future, the institutions, universities, civil society, schools, multinationals, you know, we would all be contributing to the future we want. Oh yes, the seeds grown yesterday, today, and tomorrow would have become fruit-producing trees. So as we come to the end of this session, we can celebrate, we should celebrate. And we should live with greater passion and determination to build upon the labor of the last 10 years. Indeed, like I said, we may not be able to delete with a button. You know, Bernardo, we may not be able to just press delete and all the problems are gone. We may not be able to do that. But we can, and we must continue to breed the stars. For no night remains unaltered when a star is born. So let them shine forth in their host. Let them shine brighter and brighter. Let them feel the dark night, regardless of the bombings and let the stars continue to shine. For no night remains night when overtaken by stars. Education cannot be the same again. It has been overtaken by the ESD stars. And on this note, I would like to thank UNESCO, for inviting us for this session, the government of Japan. And I would like to thank my erudite, accomplished, and masterly panelists and all the participants. Please, can you join me in giving an applause to this panel? Thank you very much.